My name's Lee Vorderer, and today the Access for All Committee is holding its annual service to help us think about issues that relate to folks with disability, folks who are elders. Just for those of you who aren't particularly aware of it, Access for All is a program that the UUA runs. We've been participants since we were a field test a decade ago, and it has resulted in a lot of changes in our building, the railings, signage that you see, something I bet nobody in this room has seen, but this is a large print edition of our hymnal. So if you are a person who would prefer not to read the itsy-bitsy print, they are located by the usher's bench in the back, and you should feel free to ask for one when you come. We have looked at building accessibility as part of our effort. And we've also looked at inclusion and what is it that helps people who have disabilities or people who are elders not feel part of what's happening. Some of that is practical. You can't hear, so we have more hearing things. We have some large print things. But what also needs to happen is that we all need to reflect a little bit about the attitudes we have about disability and the way we behave around people with disability. So many of our services, you may recall, have invited folks with disability who have vibrant, active, wonderful lives to talk about those lives with you. Today, we're having some other vibrant and wonderful people who are going to talk about trust. If you recall, or you read your parishioner, you were asked to think about how trust plays a role in your lives. And we're going to do that today through three guests. And if there's time, I have something to say too, but there might not be. We want you to think about the trust that you have in the people in your life and in the systems that you work with. And we want you to think about the standards that you hold for trust. I have a good friend, and I remember telling her a secret one time, and I made really clear that it was for her ears only. And about a week later, I heard one of her friends talking to one of her friends about my secret. So, you have to have different standards. But fundamentally, you need to really understand what trust is about. So that leads us to our opening words, which are from Annie Lamott, from Bird by Bird, some instructions on writing and life. You own everything that happened to you. Tell your stories. If people wanted you to write warmly about them, then they should have behaved better. You get your confidence and your intuition back by trusting yourself, by being militantly on your own side. You need to trust yourself. Don't look at your feet, just dance. So, with those words in mind, we're going to sing I Wish I Knew How, and it's number 151 in your gray hymnals, which I don't seem to have.
And we join in the words of our unison affirmation. Love is the spirit of this church, and service is its law. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another. El amor es el espíritu de esta iglesia, y el servicio es su ley. Este es nuestro gran pacto, vivir juntos en paz, buscar la verdad en el amor y ayudarnos los unos a los otros. And before you sit down, turn and introduce yourself to someone you may not know. All right, enough of that. Stop it. Stop it. Stop it, I say. Good morning. One more time, good morning. Welcome, everybody. Welcome. As you know, if you've been here forever, if you've been here for the very first time, welcome whomever you are in all our diversities. Some UU churches have a slogan that we welcome everyone, love beyond belief. Love is what unites us. Beliefs are important as well, identities are important as well, but there is a greater wholeness that unites us beyond all our diversities of politics and theology and belief and disbelief and race and gender and orientation and presentation and ability and disability, and you get the idea. We are love beyond belief. I am so proud of the work that our Access for All committee is doing. As Lee indicated, this is part of a denominational UUA program, and we were actually the second congregation in the entire country to be certified as an AIM, Accessibility and Inclusion Ministry congregation. And it is largely about invisible disabilities and making us universally accessible, not making accommodation to special needs, but looking for universal inclusion. So this is great, and I am proud that we're doing this. I'm also very, very proud that we had a great chili cook-off last night, and there were 60 or 70 people here, and it made $628, and hold your raucous applause for the winner of Best Meat Chili was Mr. Mark Bailey, the Best Veggie Chili. Pay no attention to what the guy behind the pulpit says. The Best Veggie Chili was Henry Gittens. The hottest chili was Richie Conrad. The Best Youth Chili, again, Henry Gittens. And the Best in Show was Paul Bradford. Now, do pay attention to things that are in the order of service announcements, because there is a big program about UU the Vote that is happening after the service at noon, and you're welcome to join for the UU the Vote program. And also you're encouraged to pay attention to the upcoming auction. And, you know, auctions don't really work all that well unless people contribute to auctions and show up the night of the auction event. So please mark your calendars and please make contributions to the auction. Today is a one-room schoolhouse day in our religious education program. And so kids after the time for all ages are to go to room 202, and the pre-K to nursery folks are to go to the nursery for their program. And without further ado, oh, no, there is further ado, and that is, one more time, give it up for the Encore Dance Ensemble. Thank you. Thank you so much for being a part of it. It's good to have all of us here together. Away you go, Sharon McDonald.
Do you know what Project Adventure is? The ropes course? Yeah, what is it? Lane School. What is it? It's scary. Ropes, right, up in the sky. And challenge to what? Trust. To trust. Challenge to trust. This isn't about the lion's whiskers. I thought the better of that. I didn't want to scare you. This is about ropes and a flying squirrel and trust. A few years ago, I was helping Sarah Dorr teach the coming of age group, which is a bunch of 8th graders. This year it was about 7. There was Lucy, there was Jeffrey, there was Mike. Oh, that Mike. He was always talking about tipping cows and gorillas. So one day we went on a project adventure, drove in the van off to the place where all the ropes were and did a couple exercises, and then we were doing the flying squirrel, which involved something like a telephone pole. We're not talking the chandelier, we're talking the ceiling. A rope up to the top of the pole, down again, the kids, all 7 of them, and pulling on the end like a tug of war, and someone harnessed. 1, 2, 3, you get lifted up into the air to the very top. That's the flying squirrel. So the kids did it one by one. Mike was first, and he delivered his tipping cows and gorillas and every other comment that he had to do. Then they harnessed him up, and the group started to pull, and up he went, and he started yelling, "Let me down, let me down, let me down." The other kids did it one by one, and then the director said, "Sharon, you do it." They didn't ask Sarah Dorr. They asked me. So thinking, these are kids, and I'm a rather heavy person. Can they lift me? And they're fooling around with tipping cows and gorillas and stuff. Did they think it would be funny to drop me? But I harnessed up, 1, 2, 3. The tug of war pulled me up into the air. I have chills just thinking about it. I was up in the air. It was a flying squirrel, and I was singing, "I wanna crow." It was amazing, just amazing. But the point is the trust. The trust like a rope between me and them. Trust.
Thank you, Sharon. So while whatever kids are here go off to their one-room schoolhouse, we're all going to get together and we're going to sing. And we're going to sing. If you want to sing out, Cat Stevens, and you're going to play. The words are in here. Thank you, Brad. So as I mentioned, and Sharon reminded you, today we're going to be talking about trust. And we've got 3 folks who are on the Access for All committee who are going to talk about trust. The kinds of trust we're thinking about are sort of what I talked about earlier, the trust that you have with your friends, if you're lucky, the trust that you have with systems that are meant to work. Your cell phone is supposed to work, you expect it's gonna. I don't, but most people expect it's gonna, and you don't have to worry about it. And so each of the folks is coming up to talk to you about some aspect of trust in their lives. All of the stories are not about disability, and there was a reason for that. When I mentioned earlier that we think about inclusion, we aren't talking about shoving people in. We're talking about everybody feeling welcomed from every point of view. So some of these stories won't be about disability or elders, but we hope that they will be stories that resonate for you in some way. So here we go. Ann Larkin, you're going to be first. Thanks.
Well, you'll have to forgive me. Being an educator, I bring all my books and everything with me. So I should have brought my high heels, too.
Wait a minute. Wait. Move.
Thank you, Lee.
Magic.
Hey.
An accommodation.
Well, I'm very pleased that the theme today is trust, because you have to know how to make it work to get your results. Many times, it is very difficult for parents, grandparents of children or adults with special needs to put trust in people, in organizations, and in schools, and in state departments, in the medical profession, because of the many problems that they encounter trying first to get the services that they need for their children or adults, the cooperation of getting the parties, providing those services, the rejections of placements, and so many other obstacles that they face just to have their child live a healthy, happy, and productive life. But we have learned, all of us, that without trust and hard work on our part, you won't get the results that will benefit your child or your grandchild, but it is not easy. My husband and I have been on a roller coaster ride with our son, John, who just turned 55 in January. I think I look pretty good for a kid with 55. And I tell him to stop telling people what his age is, because then they'll figure out mine. So we needed to find the answers, and believe me, over 50 years ago, there weren't any answers for autism. So we had to travel a lot to find out what is going on everywhere else. Are they doing things that we should be doing? And boy, they were, in Japan, in Israel, in other states. So we came back with a lot of those answers. But the main thing is we started to reach out to other parents and grandparents. And we started working with them. And believe me, the parents have made a difference in special ed in this state and in this country. We started to join organizations that advocated for children with special needs, and we developed relationships, and this is important, with local and state politicians. Because as soon as you work on their campaigns, as you call them, they'll pick up those phones very quickly. We, as parents, as well as some of the organizations, helped to make the special needs laws in this state, Chapter 766, and the great one, Turning 22. Because, let me tell you, there were no plans for when our children reached a certain age. So parents were the people that said, what happens next? We want them to continue to grow and progress. So we started the Turning 22. But the good news is that we started to build mutual trust with all of them, emphasizing the point that we are the parents or the grandparents and will always be there making sure that our children or adults with special needs always get the services that they need. But we are not their adversaries. We are the team players with them. But they deserve respect and the opportunity to have a bright future. And I need to emphasize that I know it is not easy because it hasn't been easy. In spite of all that's been done and accomplished in the last 50 years, especially in Massachusetts, where we are the leader now in special ed. Everybody's moving to Massachusetts, by the way. The waiting lists for group homes are very long. The inclusion of our children in regular classes to learn with their peers and develop positive friendships is still at the beginning stages, and I know because I supervise in many of those inclusion schools. Some schools are very successful, and I sit there saying they get it, and yet others have not, and then I report them to the state. Also, very important, and I would like to say this to all of you, is the future planning of your children. Because there are a lot of things that have to be done. And I just want to quickly mention that the parents started a group called PALS, Personal Advocacy and Lifetime Support. And in that group, we developed a futures book. And now that we've given it over after many years to the ARC, now they have a nice disc that if you're into technology, you can use the disc, but I love the book. And in the book is everything you need to do with the planning, and start early. The outreach, the persistence, the determination can lead to positive results. Our son, John, lives in a beautiful home in Littleton with a great manager and a caring staff, and that's what you've got to oversee. And as parents, we are major participants on this team. Their communication is open and it's honest. We resolve problems together. And here is where the trust comes in. John is involved in many activities. He swims, he's into kayaking, bowling, track events, visit to parks, museums, hiking trails, vacations, holiday parties, and parents can participate and do in many of these. And as I say to people, he has a better social life than I have. His day program is also very supportive and filled with many activities, as well as academic, behavioral, and social programs. That has to continue through adults. We attend all of his ISPs, individual service plans, to listen to all the reports from the specialists with our questions and our input. And when John comes home to our home, certain weekends, he loves to attend the UU Church. And we are pleased that all of you people really welcome him as a member of this congregation. But I must say, he loves the music the best. Where's Brad? Brad. Yeah. And the chorus and Bob and all of you, I mean, he really does participate. I would just like to say a little bit by ending to the parents and grandparents, you're not alone. I mean, I still get many calls from parents, from grandparents, I need this, I can't get this, I don't. We're out there. There are lots of advocates. There are private advocates, there are advocates in the state, and there are advocates in the schools. I teach at, well, I retired twice, but I did teach at Lesley University, and we have wonderful students who will serve also and help you. It's not easy, I want to emphasize that, but reach out, not only to the parent groups, but reach out to the ARCs, mass advocacy is wonderful, reach out to the state and the private advocates. It's not easy, but good things can happen. And the last thing before I end, I want to share with you a book, naturally, and it's called Why Will No One Play With Me? And it's by Caroline McGuire, and she is amazing. Now, I could not get all the books delivered here, so what I did, because as I said, I have Xeroxed the whole cover of everything so you know how to order it and how to get it to, and it is amazing. Caroline graduated from Leslie. That's why she's so amazing, by the way. And she graduated in 2011, but she has been such a support to parents, to children, and to adults. So I am going to leave the Xerox copies for you to take so you know about the book. And then I would like to say, remember, you're not alone. Thank you.
And yes, freely we have received, freely give. For the good work of this congregation within and far, far beyond these walls, our morning offering will gratefully be received.
We have two more formal stories to tell you, but before we start, I want to share something of mine, since we have a little time. I used to live in Cambridge, and I worked for the then Department of Mental Retardation, and on the weekends I used to haul myself into Boston and wander around the public garden and look at the ducks and such. One day, it was in the spring, I was aimlessly doing something, and this person, this young woman, and her, I would say, 3 or 4-year-old daughter came toward me, and this child had pale red hair that was in curls, and it was gorgeous. It was just dazzling. So I, from a distance, said to the woman, this little girl has the most beautiful hair I have ever seen. And the woman started to cry. Usually, people don't cry when I talk to them, so I thought, okay, I don't know what I did, but I clearly did something. So I went over to her and said, I'm sorry, did I hurt your feelings? And she couldn't stop crying. So we sat on, the little benches that are around, and eventually she said, it's the first time anybody ever said anything good about my daughter. I thought, wow, she's 3 or 4. How is that possible? I didn't say that to her. I thought that, and she said that. What had happened to her was that when her daughter was born, the baby's father didn't want to have a child with a disability, and so he left. And her parents didn't want to have a child with a disability in their family, and they asked her to put the child up for adoption. And she didn't want to do that. This was her baby. So she didn't, and she had no longer a relationship with her parents. And I thought how awful that must be to feel like the people you have to trust who are going to be there for you aren't. They're just not. I didn't leave her on the bench to cry. I called some folks, and some of them are people you've met here, who picked her up and connected her, and she's doing fine. And her daughter, who is now in her mid-20s, is doing fine as well. She has a job and is having a fine life. But sometimes it's important, I think, when we talk about trust, to remember that when it's not there, it can be a really big deal. Imagine having nobody ever say anything good to you about your little kid. I just can't imagine what that must feel like. So to hear better stories, we're going to hear from Irene Gravina, and then we're going to hear from Noelle Denny-Brown, and we're going to start with Irene, wherever you are. There you are.
Hello. Can you hear me? Okay. About 10 years ago, as I drove through the grounds of the VA hospital, going 25 miles an hour in a 20-mile-an-hour zone, a policeman pulled me over. My daughter was standing on a corner at Middlesex Community College waiting for a ride. I lowered my window as the policeman approached, and then my daughter called me on my cell. As I told her what happened, the policeman barked at me, "Put down the phone." I showed him her photo on my screen and told him she was waiting, but he answered louder, "Put down the phone." I tried to explain that she had special needs, and as a matter of trust, I could not just hang up. His answer, louder still, "Put down the phone." I thought this might have something to do with 9/11, bombs and cell phones or something. But instead of giving in, I simply rolled up my window and told her where I was and what I was doing. Meanwhile, the policeman walked around my car and noted that my inspection sticker was overdue and my license was expired. My daughter and our family had been going through a rough patch, and those deadlines had slipped by because basically I only had so much bandwidth, to deal with everything. Finally, he handed me the ticket, $650. Yeah. So I took it, but I decided to contest it to tell somebody in power what had happened, regardless of whether the fines got reduced. I felt that other kids, any kid, could be put at risk by the coercion he had displayed. His behavior did not seem right to me. The Bedford police were always professional, caring, and most importantly, followed the law, all of the laws. Our exceptional officers know how to take care of special needs kids. I felt that the policeman's order violated my daughter's civil rights to be safe, and for her mother to make sure that she was safe. The VA is federal property, so I had to go to the Worcester Federal Court at 8 a.m. after arranging for my daughter to get on the school bus, and told my story to an officer who assists the judge. He asked me if I was willing to pay the fine, and I said yes. I just came to tell someone what had happened. And he told me I should have just spoken to the VA chief, but to wait and appear before the judge. So I did. After more than an hour, the strain of the whole situation got to me, and I found myself unable to keep myself from crying over in a corner of this huge courtroom, quietly. And finally my turn came, and in this court, the judge is way up high, and you're like way down low. And I told him that the officer told me I should have talked to the chief in my area, and so, I understood like what I should have done, and everything was fine. And he said, no, please explain the details to the court. So I did, and when I finished, to my surprise, he banged down his gavel and said, "Case dismissed." And so what I learned from this was that to trust my own judgment, to trust the system, and also I hoped that the officer involved learned something about trust as well. So, thank you.
So from Anne, we learned that systems can be trained, which she surely did. And from Irene, that sometimes systems work, even though they don't work immediately. Noelle's going to come and talk with us about trust and colleagues.
Good morning, everyone. It's so nice to speak before all of you today. So the story that I'll share today is grounded in my early experience working in a homeless shelter for men. I volunteered at a local shelter nearby in Lowell when I was 17 and about to enter my senior year of high school. And it's important to note this shelter was known as what's called a wet shelter, meaning that people could be under the influence of drugs or alcohol when receiving services and supports there. Reflecting back, I was a pretty fearless teen, but on that first day, I remember walking down the street towards the shelter feeling very fearful. Fearful of the people sleeping on benches, fearful of the people huddled in alleyways nearby using drugs, and also fearful of the men nearby rifling through trash cans looking for cans and bottles that they could redeem for money. These were all people in very desperate need, and quite honestly, before that day, they were invisible to me. But walking down the street, I immediately understood the very sharp inequities between my comfortable suburban middle-class existence and the extreme poverty that they experienced every day. I volunteered at the shelter helping to prepare meals for 300 people each night, and I learned that the majority of those who frequented the shelter had a disability. Many had severe mental illness, they lacked access to adequate health care, and most were estranged from their family and their friends. And even though we all came from very diverse backgrounds, we really established a genuine, real connection. Over time, I grew to love the job, but more importantly, I really loved the people. I loved working alongside my coworkers, all of whom were previously homeless. One gentleman was a veteran with a traumatic brain injury. Another was a recovering alcoholic. And one woman was a former prostitute who aspired to go back to school one day. A few weeks after I began volunteering at the shelter, I was offered a permanent job there, earning more than what I was earning working as a clerk at a nearby drugstore. And I went home and I was excited about the news, and I told my parents the good news, and they both immediately said, "You cannot accept the position. You will not be working there this year." And I was pretty heartbroken. And I understood their concern. They were concerned about my safety, being a minor, being 17, working in a homeless shelter for men, and just being exposed to a lot of safety issues. But I also understood that I was close to turning 18, and I knew that for me it was the right decision to accept the position, which I ultimately did, against my parents' wishes. And this created some friction between us, as you can imagine. Soon after, the holidays approached, and I asked my father to work with me at the shelter to help prepare the Thanksgiving meal, which he did. and he stayed late that night. And he washed the dishes, and we closed down the shelter, and then driving home, he gave me his blessing to work there. So since that time, I have worked at probably more than a dozen jobs. But when I reflect back on that early experience, I realize now that it was probably one of my favorite jobs. And working at the shelter was really eye-opening. You know, it really shaped who I was as a person, it shaped my understanding of the world, and it also set me on a path to become a social worker and later a disability policy researcher. As Lee mentioned, the theme of today's service is trust, and although it's not central to my story, I think it underlies my story in a couple of ways. I established trust in the relationships that I built with my coworkers and my new friends, who came from very different backgrounds than me. And then I also trusted my own instincts and judgment when I accepted the job against my parents' wishes. And then finally, my parents eventually came around to trusting my decision to work there after school during my senior year of high school. So I'm really thrilled that storytelling is the focus of today's service. You know, I really feel like this builds connections between people and just reminds us all of our shared humanity. So thank you for listening. I think next we're going to sing Lean on Me, which is hymn 1021 in the teal hymnal.
So we're almost done. And you can go get your coffee and all the other stuff that needs to happen with your day. But I'd like to leave you thinking about trust, maybe in a new way because of the stories you've heard today. Think back of your own stories where trust played a part, where the support of other people meant the world and you had a hard time getting it, or maybe you got it and it changed direction for you. Where the systems that are supposed to work and support you did, yay, and you got to a place where you want to be because of that. And we're going to finish with the closing words we use every access service, and it's because our committee finds them compelling, and in light of what we've been talking about today, I think they're particularly important. They're from Margaret Mead. If we're to achieve a richer culture, we must weave one in which diverse human gifts will find a fitting place. First Parish here has become a fitting place for many of us. We have to think about how to make the places outside more fitting as well. Thanks. So we'll have our postlude.